This is Geek Gab, the Geekerific Gab Fest with your hosts, Dornall, Bryan Nienemeyer, and me, Daddy Warpig. We are back. That's right, Geek Gab once a week, every Sunday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. All play, no work. Get you rested up from the last week, ready to go for the next week. Today's topic is second-rate science fiction. That's right, all that's mediocre in the sci-fi world today. We're going to be talking about parallels. We're going to be talking about the new Bryan Singer movie. We're going to be talking about Chappie, the just-released movie by the director of District 9, and we are going to be talking about, hopefully, if we get to it before the end of the show, Call of Duty Advanced Warfare. And as is typical at this point in the show, I pause for a brief moment and allow my hosts to get a word in edgewise. Dornall, how was your week?
Hey everybody, my week's been great. Been a chill week at work. Had my dad visiting. Not so much geeky stuff going on, but I was just kind of wondering. We're doing second-rate sci-fi this week. I thought we did that last week with all the Star Trek stuff.
Oh, it's a good thing Mr. Wright isn't here to hear you say that. I think he might be a little upset. How are you, Bryan?
I'm outstanding. Thanks for asking. And yeah, I got to comment on that Star Trek quip. Them's fighting words. Hope you're prepared for the flack you're going to take for that.
Oh, I had them mixed up. I meant Star Wars. We're talking about Star Wars this week, right?
Depending on which ones, that's acceptable.
And I think you've made every geek listening in mad, so, mission accomplished in the first minute or two.
I just, hate is one of my favorite things to, wallow in. It's wonderful.
All right, Captain Schadenfreude, way to go. You're thorough, if nothing else.
See, that's the thing, though, about geeks, is that we get in, really, really nasty fights over the most minute minutia. I try to avoid it anymore since I've gotten older, but, you hear people arguing about who would win in a fight, X superhero or Y superhero. You're like, guys, really? It doesn't matter. They're fictional characters. Enjoy them. It's cool. At this point, if I had named a couple of superheroes, I'd totally throw out a name just to tick people off. Who'd win in a fight, Batman or Captain America? Batman, obviously. Come on. He beat Superman in Batman The Dark Knight Returns. Totally written by a Batman fanboy, but that doesn't matter. He's got the cunning and the guile going on, and Captain America doesn't even know how to spell guile. So.
True. Speaking of which, it's interesting you mention that because one of my buddies showed me a pretty well-produced Batman versus Darth Vader short on YouTube the other night.
Yes. Did you see the original or the remake?
I don't know.
The remake is in the queue to go up as a post on the site. I might as well do it tonight since it's come up on the air. The original had kind of a... I didn't think it was an apt ending considering who Batman was. The second one, the one I'm going to post a link to, was perfectly Batman. It is absolutely everything you'd ever expect Batman to be. So I'll throw that up on the House of Geekery blog, daddywarpig.com, for our post tonight, so you guys can see it tomorrow. This frees me from the need to put a link in the description.
Intriguing.
Speaking of links in the description, one link I've already got ready to go in the description. We're going to start off the sci-fi, subpar sci-fi, with something that isn't released yet, that we haven't seen yet, that I personally am just predicting will be second-rate, subpar science fiction, and that is Bryan Singer is directing an adaptation of Robert Heinlein's novel, The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. This was just announced last week. Changing the name to Uprising. The script for it will be written by the executive producer of Arrow, Mark Guggenheim. Now, I know John is a John Wright, who came on the show, is a big fan of this novel. I'd actually like to. I'm going to send him this link and get his feedback on that, because I think it's going to be bad. That's just my opinion. Here's the thing. Either of you, we were talking before the show, neither of you have read The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, right?
I have not.
Not me.
Okay. One of Robert Heinlein's phrases that he became famous for was "tan staffel." There ain't no such thing as a free lunch. And it came from, the first time I think it was used was in The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. It's about a bunch of colonists on the moon who are under political dominance of Earth, who have a AI spring up accidentally in the mainframe of the colony, and then with this AI, they plot to free the colony from the oppressive political thumb of Earth. So the entire novel is about a revolution on the moon. And it is far too, if I could use the term libertarian, and far too it's not a political novel in the sense of having long lectures against politics, but it's definitely libertarian in that the government is seen as an oppressive force, and it is generally ill-liked. And the moon, if you live in the colony on the moon, you have to pay a fee for your air to continue to breathe. It's been many years since I've read it, but if you can't pay the fee, bad things happen. And I just don't see that being something that a Hollywood director is going to portray with any sympathy, is forcing people to pay for air that they breathe. And that actually comes up as a plot point in the book, that a lot of people are upset because, or some people are upset and complain about needing to pay for the air that they breathe. So that's my belief why it's not going to be a good adaptation, is like Starship Troopers, they're just going to not even take the name, just take the raw concept, Revolution on the Moon, and build whatever they want around it without any reference to the original novel. I don't even know why they bothered to option the novel. That's my opinion.
Yeah,
Well,
go ahead.
Well, I mean, wouldn't it be just to make money?
Well, they could make a movie that has nothing to do with, or very little to do with, The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, about a revolution on the moon. If you're going to rewrite everything about it, why pay to option this particular novel? That's my point.
Who knows why Hollywood does anything? I mean, look at Blade Runner, for example. There's very little resemblance to its source material, only superficial. The title was taken from a William S. Burroughs work of a different name that they only slapped onto Philip K. Dick's story, like, to keep the rights. So, I don't know.
Yeah, but the result there was actually a pretty cool movie.
Oh, definitely. But I mean, that was back in the 80s when anyone could go to the mob and get a loan to make a movie, you know? It's a different culture.
So what about the story would make a good movie, do you think?
Like a lot of Heinlein science fiction, it's primarily cerebral. It is political in inspiration. They spend a good chunk of the book on their efforts to build a government after the revolution. Like trying to form a constitution and the intricate processes of setting up committees to make this constitution. I just don't see that translating well to the screen.
Sounds pretty dry.
In the book, it's pretty fascinating because it's an intellectual book. It's speaking to intellectual thoughts and ideas. It's big idea science fiction. It's not action movie science fiction, which it may surprise you. I'm actually a fan of big idea science fiction to a certain extent, so long as the big idea isn't boring, deliberate tracing of the minutia of a bureaucracy, the way this last book I started last week was. It's not an action movie, though. I just don't see how it's going to translate easily to the screen or well to the screen.
I don't know. I think I see where you're going with this, and it sounds like awesome moon battles sounds like a great movie to me. I don't know.
Yeah. See, that part sounds great. It would be like that movie that just came out by Luc Besson about the space station rescuing the president's daughter and escaping and.
Oh, geez. The one with I just saw this one recently.
Yeah, so did I. I know. It's in my
Yeah, that's it.
Lockdown. Yes. So, yeah, it sounds like Lockdown on the surface of the moon with some more space battles, or that would be a cool movie, but it wouldn't be The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. That's what befuddles me. If you want to make that movie, great, make that movie, but you don't need to. You don't need to option The Moon is a Harsh Mistress to do it.
Yeah, I'm with you. And they could never make a movie like that nowadays, not Hollywood. I mean, Star Trek the Motion Picture might have been the last truly deliberately paced, cerebral sci-fi movie. I don't know.
See, I think that's what they were going for with Interstellar. I don't know if either of you saw that.
I did.
Skipped it.
And that was an enjoyable movie. It was a really well done movie. But at the same time, I have a difference between movies and books. Movies, I like action movies, and books, I like action books, but I also have a big fondness for slow, big idea books that aren't shoot 'em ups. I mean, that's the only reason you could read most typical science fiction is they're not action adventure. They're not necessarily action, and I guess I'm talking about sci-fi that came out during big authors' post-pulp phases. Like a lot of Isaac Asimov, if you read 2001, not an action novel. If you read most of his psychohistory novels, the Empire novels, Empire, Second Empire, so on and so forth.
Foundation.
Foundation, yeah. Those are not action movie novels. He did enough pulp stuff that weren't fighting, but were at least cerebral action. Yeah. I like that. I have a taste for that in books. It's just in movies, typically, when Hollywood directors try to get all deep and thoughtful, they produce crap like Lucy.
Yeah, Mike Stoklasa talks about how there are two broad types of science fiction movies. There are the more classic, drawn-out, slow, cerebral films that talk about weighty concepts and says, I like those. I can go out halfway through the movie, get my tires rotated, get a haircut, go to the bank, come home. I haven't missed anything. And he cites Star Trek the Motion Picture as a perfect example of that, whereas Star Trek 2009 is more of like the rock and roll to original Star Trek's classical music. It's an action movie. It's an adventure yarn. Things are going to blow up. It's going to be fast-paced. There will be caffeine cam all over the place and lens flare. And the latter type is all that ever gets made nowadays. I mean, even Interstellar had explosions and like daring aeronautics and fights and stuff.
Yeah, the whole scene after they landed on the ice planet. Basically, that entire ice planet sequence and the water planet sequence, and there was a lot of that adventure in there.
So yeah, I agree with you. I don't think Singer's going to be able to resist the temptation just to dumb it down into an adventure flick. But again, it might be a good movie. But yeah, based on the way you describe the book, it's not going to be Moon is a Harsh Mistress.
Okay.
So well, clear this up for me. Bryan Singer, that's a familiar name. Did he do the good X-Men's or the bad X-Men's?
He did the two first good X-Men's. Then he did 2006 Superman, which is pretty bad.
Oh, yeah.
And then he came back, and I think I don't know if he executive produced or actually directed the time travel X-Men, Days of Future Past, which just came out.
He did direct that, yeah.
He did direct that, okay.
He didn't direct First Class, but he produced that one, and he directed Days of Future Past. But between there, he did Jack the Giant Killer.
I didn't see that. I heard that was terrible.
Yeah, I didn't see it.
Okay. So Moon is a Harsh Mistress. I'm kind of down on it. I think it'll. I don't think it will. I don't think it's going to be a very good movie necessarily. The closer they stick to the book, the worse the movie is. The further they get away from the book, the better the movie might be. But the worse an adaptation of this specific book it will be.
So which would you rather have?
If they're going to make a fights on the moon Revolution movie, I would rather have them make an action movie like that, because at least I know Bryan Singer and Hollywood can do that competently. Whereas I don't think they can make a competent adaptation of The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. I just don't. So, any other comments before we jump ahead?
Nope.
Okay. Parallels. Fox Digital. I posted the trailer to this on my site. I said, hey, I might watch this. I did watch it, and now I'm going to give you my review of it. It's presented as an hour-and-a-half movie. It is not a movie. It's actually 2 episodes, the pilot episodes of a TV series that did not get picked up and has not gone into production. So they stuck it together as a movie and put it on Netflix in the hopes that they could get some money from Netflix. It went live a week ago on Sunday. It's about a building that moves between parallel Earths for reasons that are unknown, operated for ways that are unknown, powered by who knows. And 3 kids get stuck in the building when it moves from one Earth to the next, and now are traveling from world to world, and their goals in the beginning are to try and find their way home. And if you're thinking Sliders without the funky sliding vortex effect, you are absolutely pretty much correct. At least in the first 2 episodes, they did not depart much from the Sliders template, from the Sliders formula. They ran into alternate versions of themselves. They ran into a world where the city and a large portion of the planet had been nuked in a war, and they ran into alternate versions of people they knew in their world, which is ostensibly our world, but they haven't made it really clear yet. And there's a big mystery with who controls the building, and their goal is to try and get to the one world where someone could actually construct the building, which they call the core Earth, or core world. And it was all right. It wasn't superb, but it's not a movie. It's the setup to a series. They're putting all the stuff in place to continue generating episodes based on this specific formula.
Okay.
So, I actually saw Sliders, but not a lot of it. Like, cast of characters wise, how does it compare? I mean, I know you said that they hit a lot of the plot points and everything, but one of the great things about Sliders was kind of the characters themselves. So what did you think from that perspective? Did they have the same kind of great cast of characters?
Sliders, the strength of Sliders, they actually had some characters who were kind of silly, but at the same time made sense. Like they had that big professor, played so ably by a great actor who was slumming, who also played Gimli, who also played Sulla in
John Rhys Davies.
John Rhys Davies, yeah. And he played a college professor perfectly. You could easily see him being a college professor, a little bit pompous, very educated, very fun. They had the crying man who had been a one-hit wonder in the 50s, who was now, living his life out trying to eke money from performances of the one song that they actually succeeded. He was a fun and interesting character. And then they had a boy genius and the girl who was in love with him, but he didn't know about it. those characters were kind of stock characters, and they were a little bit funny, a little bit off the, a little bit odd, but they were fun enough to carry the series. These three characters they're more straightforward and not as colorful. The main dude is an MMA fighter who left his family because he had a problem with his dad. He was in a car accident with his mom. His mom got killed, and he's been fighting in the MMA. His sister is the neighborhood pretty girl who's a little bit smart but really, really pretty. And then the other person is the kind of low self-esteem loser who's also smart but isn't succeeding at life and is really feeling bad about it. And that's the three characters. That's all that really distinguishes them, is they didn't put a lot of effort into making them distinctive or pop in that sense. So they're kind of just generic characters that you might see in any given random teen movie like The Maze Runners or Mockingjay or whatever. They're not even as well developed as those characters. So they were kind of disappointing. I can see why the show wasn't picked up by a network despite being funded for a pilot.
Well, that addresses the characters pretty well. I'd like to comment and ask a question about the plot.
Sure.
So I noticed that they're going with the old, characters trying to get home, overarching plot.
Sure.
Like from Gilligan's Island, Voyager, and it's always struck me that there's
the Odyssey.
Yeah, the Odyssey. There's always a built-in problem or challenge with that plot, which the Odyssey didn't have because Odyssey's a book. It's not an ongoing TV series, which is that it kind of puts an automatic countdown timer on the show, because you've got this goal the characters want to reach, getting home, and the audience is rooting for them to do so, but as soon as you fire that Chekhov's gun and you keep that promise, your show is pretty much over unless you can scramble to think of a way to keep it going, and it usually feels pretty artificial after that point. Burn Notice, a good example. After Michael found out who burned him, the show just kind of lost its way. I don't know.
Yeah,
So do you think that this is, like, Perel is in danger of that, or did the plotting seem...
I don't know that they actually thought through the show well enough to run into that problem yet. At one point, they talk about a nuclear bomb going off in the city and how this guy is complaining about how his wife and daughter died over a long period of time from thermal radiation. Now, thermal radiation is just heat. It's just things being hot. And yes, if you blow up a city with a nuclear device, there's a lot of thermal radiation. But you don't die slowly over a period of several weeks or months from the heat produced by the blast. You die slowly from radiation sickness because you've received a huge dose of high energy radioactive particles, or even fallout, which is dust that has been irradiated with radioactive particles. The show did not do... It threw a bunch of stuff at the wall, and then typically what you do at that point is hand it to a tech advisor, hand the script to a technical advisor, someone who knows physics or whatever, to just look over it and realize, okay, this large central portion of the show is BS, but here's some tiny details that you need to fix. And they didn't do that step. They didn't have somebody who knew what they were talking about when it comes to fixing small details come in and just address these little problems. So I don't think the show is thought through. I don't think the writers of the show... I don't even know if they've got as far as hiring a showrunner yet, which is the individual who's in charge of actually producing the series. But they just didn't seem to think through things well enough to have worried about that point or even what to do when they get to that point.
Well, that stuff doesn't really matter, does it? I mean, does it really? I mean, people have been reading comic book shit for years and decades, and watching god-awful TV shows like Parallels, for example,
It depends. I'm going to get off into writer's craft here for a minute, so bear with me. Brandon Sanderson talks about how, as a writer, you've got to project that you're a jack of all trades and a master of all trades. You've got to try to get everything right, and the key is, if you get a few big things perfectly right, most readers, 90% readers, will bear with you for the small things. But he said, for example, because he writes fantasy, there's always the horse people, the equestrians, who without fail, no matter how well he researches it, will always write in and be like, I noticed your characters rode up to the inn and just tied up their horses, and the next scene was them leaving. Did they leave the horses out in the rain overnight? Shame on them. He's like, I didn't even think about it. But there's always going to be something you'll miss that someone's going to nitpick, so you do the best you can. But yeah, Daddy Warpig's right. I mean, studios pay technical experts to make sure there are no glaring errors like that. Like, my daughter and wife died from being convection heated at 125 degrees over a week. So yeah, not too terribly well thought out.
I mean, case in point is my wife and I just wrapped up. Actually, we marathoned the second season of Hannibal. Now that it's finally available online, and it's a brilliant show. A brutal horror. It's just if you're into gore horror, but it has a ton of those things, especially with the investigations. I mean, like as far as the FBI's homicide investigations, they're not quite Miami Metro from Dexter bad, but I mean, there's they bend and break all the rules as far as like what they're legally allowed to do and the things that they do during the investigation, but you don't care just because because you're trying to figure out where the hell the plot is going, and of course Hannibal himself is really interesting, and all the other characters are really good and fleshed out, and so I don't know. That's why I say sometimes that stuff doesn't matter.
Yeah, your mileage is going to vary depending on the reader. I mean, you just make a good faith effort to do the best you can.
I've actually found that the better the story is, the more involving the story is, the more you're keeping the audience wrapped up in the story, the less they'll notice little nitpicks. Right. But if you start to do a bad story or start to do something badly, nitpicks all of a sudden jump out because you're paying attention to everything and you're not wrapped up in how cool and exciting it is. I have found myself nitpicking much, much harder with the story itself, and the storytelling goes to pieces. And if we get to Advanced Warfare, I'll give some examples of that.
Yeah, well, so by that criterion, it sounds like then that Parallel didn't really have the strong enough plot or characters to keep you interested enough that you didn't notice that cracks were showing in the technical aspect.
Yeah, another really bizarre thing they introduced was this guy in this post-apocalyptic world built a gun that resizes itself for different calibers of bullets. I don't understand why it's there. It's a plot device in case they get stuck on a strange world where everything's in 12.7 millimeter. They've at least got one gun that'll shoot bullets from there. But it supposedly resizes the barrel 4 different calibers of bullets. He built it in a world the tech level is 1980s or early 1990s tech, because that's when the nukes went off, and all of its sound effects are electromagnetic. It doesn't have mechanical sound effects. It has, and when it shoots, it's these weird sci-fi sound effects. You're just like, where did this guy get this idea for this gun? Well, let's put aside the fact that I don't think you could actually really build something like that, especially not at our tech level today, much less 10 years ago. But
that's a question for Larry, is what that is.
Yeah. It was the most bizarre thing, and it's a single-shot weapon. So you plop the bullet in, it goes through this weird transforming noise, and then you shoot it, and it's a single-shot weapon. So it does not seem like it's cool enough or useful enough to be worth the time, and yet it's a huge plot point for the middle, third of the show. That's the other thing I noticed that was big.
That's oddly specific. Okay.
I mean, this is the thing. There's a lot of things that are odd that you just accept because they're kind of part of the premise. Like the building itself is the same from world to world, and in the world they live in, this same building has existed for 20 years, which means it doesn't so much appear and disappear as the part that moves between worlds phases in and phases out of different buildings. Does it only move between worlds in which this building exists, or did someone build these buildings on each of the worlds automatically? There's a whole bunch of questions that didn't super bother me while I was watching the show because they're part of the premise. I just kind of accepted that. I call that the bullshit. The level of bullshit you have to put up with to enjoy a book. When you go to read a fantasy novel, you know magic is going to be real, so if you can't stand it, you must be able to stand this much bullshit to read. If you can't stand magic, if that's too high, don't read fantasy, you're not going to be able to get in. So that's the bullshit requirement of this book, is just knowing, hey, there's a building, it's the same from world to world, and they phase in and out between worlds every 36 hours. Accept that or don't watch it at all because you won't be able to enjoy it. I have a specific phrase for it that I can't remember right now because I'm ill.
Well, I think you're talking about, it's a premise? Is that it? Or suspension of disbelief?
It's not just the premise. It's the notion that if you're going to watch The Mummy, the original Mummy, right?
Yeah.
There is a bullshit requirement for you to watch The Mummy. It's a pulp action movie. If you can't stand him running forward, getting shot at, being missed, frontward rolling over a piece of terrain as an obstacle with bullets spanging off the scenery, spanging off the stone, you're just not going to like the movie. Don't even watch it because you're going to hate it. That is the bullshit requirement of that movie, is that you enjoy those... you enjoy that kind of action. If you're not going to enjoy that kind of loosely related to reality, unrealistic action, don't watch the movie. You're not going to enjoy it. So it's not just the premise. It's the notion that contained in the premise are a number of things that are unrealistic. You may not have to accept them in the work, but if you're going to watch it, that's just kind of granted to the author. If you reject them, you're not going to enjoy it. Don't watch it. You can't blame it for its premise. Other things, details, the way it's developed, you can totally jump in and complain about, but those things are just kind of baked into the world.
Sure. And there's some people who can't stand sci-fi or fantasy at all. Any speculative fiction for that reason. I feel sorry for them, but
they're not listening.
Exactly.
Bullshit tax. That's what I call it, the bullshit tax.
Oh. It's a nice word.
I'm going to read this from my blog because I posted about it February of 2013. My theory on speculative fiction, like a roller coaster, a piece of genre fiction has a little sign before you get on. You must tolerate this much bullshit to enjoy your ride. Too much bullshit and you can't enjoy the ride. I call it the bullshit tax.
I love it.
And so, yeah, I mean, on the third paragraph, I note that I'm talking about the premise, the suspension of disbeliefs, and so on. When considering suspension of disbelief, works of fiction basically get their premise for free. What if Elvis was still alive and was an avatar of Cthulhu? Let's take that as a potential premise for a work. If you can't accept that, don't read the story. That's the bullshit tax. You must tolerate this much bullshit to read this story. You must be able to believe that Elvis is still alive and he's an avatar of Cthulhu. If you can't tolerate that, you won't enjoy the story at all. But even granting the author their premise, you can criticize how it's developed, both in world background and in the story. Sooner or later, you have to be able to say, no, that makes no sense. So...
I mean, the thing is that for most people, it's about internal consistency. It's not so much.
Exactly.
I mean, most people can pay the bullshit tax on most books, in my experience. But as long as it's consistent in the world, you can get through to the back cover.
Yeah, I've generally noticed that people who are attracted to speculative fiction tend to be high on a psychological spectrum where they don't like things diverging too much from reality. That's almost the central genre imperative of science fiction. And so with those readers, you've got to kind of approach it carefully. because they simply will not pay the bullshit tax for a large number of works.
So what you're saying is that like fantasy readers have a higher bullshit tax budget than sci-fi readers?
Typically, yes, I have found that to be true. Urban fantasy readers even higher. But people who, like normal people, a relative of mine just can't watch Star Trek because all the funky foreheads annoy her. She just can't take.
You know, I could accept that argument, I think, from someone who said, why on earth would all the aliens be just humans with bumpy foreheads?
Yeah. You know what? If that's what you accept or don't accept, that's cool. Just like you have to give the author their premise, you have to give the audience their bullshit tax, their tolerance for bullshit too. You have to give that to the audience. If they're just not going to accept it, that's cool. That's their choice. That's what they enjoy. You have to let them go and do that. Arguing whether or not they'll accept the premise it's not done, because it is done a lot, but I think that's kind of foolish. It's a waste of time. It's one of those geek arguments we were talking about before the show.
Agreed.
All right. I feel really bad that I'm the only one who has seen all of the things this week. So this is basically, Daddy Warpig reviews everything under the sun.
Hey man, I tried to bring Hannibal in here.
We could have brought a little bit of Arrow, because the executive producer of Arrow is writing The Moon is a Harsh Mistress movie, but I don't know. I don't know if it's that cool. If that's what
I will tell.
I absolutely love Arrow. It's not even that great this season, but it's good.
I've seen some of it. What I saw was good.
I gave it 5 episodes. I watched 5 full episodes, maybe 6, and it didn't grab me enough to make me continue wanting to watch it. And this was 6 months ago when I actually had time to watch stuff, so I haven't watched much of anything in 6 months. So maybe I'll give it another try.
I've liked Flash a bit better on the whole, I think.
I haven't seen either of those, so I could not comment. Okay. Moving on. Chappie just came out in theaters on Thursday. I was there apparently the first night, opening night, in the theater for the very first showing of Chappie. Completely by coincidence. I had a friend of mine who lives a long ways away call me up and say, hey, you want to go see a movie? I said, tonight? It's really, really late. I'm like, oh, yeah, tonight. We can't do it tonight. How about next week? I said, okay, how about Thursday? I'm not doing anything on Thursday. He was like, cool, we got together, we went to see a movie. The only movie I hadn't seen that I wanted to see was Chappie, so we ended up in the opening showing, and I think that's a bad sign, because the opening showing of Chappie was mostly empty. So, quick rundown. It's made by the same guy who made District 9, Neil Bloomkamp, who was also set to direct the Halo movie, who also made Elysium, and this is his 3rd movie, not counting a couple of shorts he made for Halo. The Chappie is about, first off, it's set in South Africa. It's set in Johannesburg, South Africa, but it does not focus on the same areas that the previous movies did. Johannesburg, South Africa, it is about a city overrun by crime, and because it's overrun by crime, a company introduces police robots.
Wait, are you sure you don't mean Detroit and Ed 209?
Yeah. Okay, somebody's got their YouTube on because we are echoing. Somebody needs to pause their YouTube, sorry. They even have a callback to RoboCop in there, but they've also got a callback to of course the sorry, I am ill tonight, folks, and my brain is shutting down. Short Circuit, the movie where the robot accidentally comes to life. This is not a robot accidentally comes to life movie. It's a movie about a designer at this robot company who actually deliberately goes in and creates AI. He deliberately goes in and creates AI, and then because of other things, goes in and uploads the AI to this robot that was damaged in a firefight, who is being controlled by a gang of crooks. I don't want to explain the whole movie because it's boring just sitting here even explaining it. The premise is so silly, I can't pay the bullshit tax. And I didn't know that going in. There's a big bad guy. He's big, he's muscular, and they have to subtitle him because he's got a heavy South African accent, even though he's speaking English. You can't understand a word he says. A bunch of peon-level crooks get shot up by robot cops. They go to him. He says, "Get me 20 million in a week or I'll kill you all." It's almost impossible. The peons, in order to get 20 million, decide they need a robot cop to reprogram so that he will come along and help them do a heist to steal the money. In order to get the robot cop, they kidnap the guy who invented the robot cops, who has also invented pure AI, and they get him to upload pure AI into the robot so they can teach him how to be a crook, so he can go help them rob this currency transfer so they can get the money so they can pay back the super tough dude. And there's another guy who develops a robot that is remotely piloted with a helmet, and because he's evil, although he's not rich, he's an engineer. Our discussion about the Chappie trailer was incorrect about that, surprisingly enough. He interferes and has to send out his robot, which looks a lot like the camouflaged Ed 209 unit. So yes, there's a lot of RoboCop. There's a lot of other nods to 80s science fiction, including Short Circuit, and even describing the convoluted plot, it deadens me. It deadens me inside. I was not excited by the movie.
Okay. So let's talk about what we thought when we saw the trailer, because what I saw in the trailer was presented, it was this sort of yeah, Johnny Five is alive, and this mullet Wolverine here, he's the bad guy because he thinks that the police shouldn't be robots. Which, when you're watching the trailer, you're like, no, that's pretty reasonable. I'm pretty sure I'm on mullet Wolverine's side. So how did that? Was that really a big part of the movie?
Yes, actually, it is a big part of the movie, but not that he doesn't think that robots should be police. He doesn't think that AI, he calls it at one point godless or whatever. He has some moral objection to AI that's never really fleshed out.
Figures.
Maybe he read Dune and became an anti-AI jihadist because of it. He read the excerpts from the Orange Catholic Bible and said, "Thou shalt not make a machine in the likeness of the mind of man." But they don't really flesh out why.
Yeah, that's a plot hole.
So his motivations, other than hating AI and wanting to destroy it, and also wanting his project to get picked over Chappie, are kind of murky. His motivations are kind of murky.
So they needed an antagonist, and they took a perfectly awesome guy and gave him a mullet, and ergo, he's an antagonist?
Yes. If you've seen District 9 or Elysium, there's a main actor that was in both. He was the main character in District 9. He was the security.
Copley.
Sorry?
Charlton Copley.
Okay. He is the voice, and I'm guessing the mocap. Well, it's not a guess. I've seen the behind-the-scenes footage a little bit. The mocap for Chappie. So he is. He's a competent actor, and he does a good job of making Chappie kind of endearing, but it's just not enough to make the movie really pop, really great. I don't know. I just found it dissatisfying. I wish I had like some deep reason. I've got pages and pages of notes that I took.
And it's this movie sucks over and over again. Is that it?
All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy.
Oh, poor Daddy Warpig.
It's a lot of, honestly, it's a lot of nitpicking is what it is. It's a lot of, hey, what about this? Hey, why are they doing that? Hey, what the heck is going on here? The movie veers randomly between these oddball, cheeseball scenes that are kind of goofy and sort of maybe a little bit heartwarming until you remember that the criminals they're trying to warm your heart about are actually murderers and drug runners who, sell drugs for kingpins and stuff. They're trying to make them, and they try to convince this robot because the creator, the maker, Slumdog Millionaire, the actor from Slumdog Millionaire, tells him, no, you can't kill people, don't do that. They're trying to raise him as if he's a child because that's what he says. He gets this blank AI installed and he's a child and he has to learn like a child and grow like a child. And he tells him, no, you can't kill people. And so they say, hey, Chappie, let's do this. And he says, no, I can't do that. That's wrong. And so these criminals that you're trying to make you feel a little bit heartwarming towards, then tell them, okay, if you take a knife and stab people, you're not actually killing them, you're just putting them to sleep. And and so when they have the heist, Chappie throws ninja stars and stabs people because he's just putting them to sleep.
Did you say ninja stars?
Ninja stars. Actual, 8-pointed ninja stars.
So when you said that they were paying homage to 80s sci-fi movies, they also went to 80s ninjas movies.
Yes, apparently so. The guy who... It's just... This is actually, I think, unintentionally hilarious, or maybe it's intentionally hilarious. Two of the main peon criminals come from a South African band called Die Antwoord, and they have the same names in the movie that their stage names in the band are. One is Ninja, and one is Yolandi. And Ninja likes knives and he likes throwing stars, and he teaches Chappie how to stab people with a knife, how to throw throwing stars, and how to walk like a stereotypical 1990s G from any one of the dozen of that movie, gangster movies that came out in the mid to late 90s, Boys in the Hood and whatever.
New York City and all that.
Yeah. He's, slouching along like he's got his pants halfway down his butt and his boxer shorts sticking out of his waist, and then Chappie starts doing it, and he's throwing gang signs with his fingers. It's just...
I assume that's meant to be funny or endearing?
Yes, it is. It's meant to be funny or endearing. It's meant to make you think that this ninja guy's an idiot, which he is, and it's meant Chappie to look cute because, oh, look at the robot mimicking American West Coast gangster thug life in South Africa, Johannesburg, in a couple of years in the future.
That's all that child abuse.
Yeah, if robots were real and if you gave AI civil protection, civil rights, that's what it would be. But it veers between those kinds of pseudo-heartwarming moments and, hard, dramatic moments where it tries to be deep and dramatic, and then all of a sudden near the end it veers sharply into a brutal bloodbath. It veers into RoboCop territory, which it hasn't been the rest of the show.
This is the guy that did District 9 and Elysium, and that was the thing with both of those movies, is that they had this sort of interesting, sort of weird sci-fi movie going on, and then at the end they just sort of fucking threw everything into a blender and had a big fight scene.
Yeah, it's a fight scene that the amount of blood and the amount of violence and the characters getting capped, and you just don't. It completely comes out of nowhere. Not that there is a fight scene, but the fact that the fight scene is it's Rambo 4 fight scene is what it is. Brutal, bloody, people dying all over the place. So yeah, you just don't expect the movie to veer. It's got a very uneven tone. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, so it sounds like major tonal dissonance in terms of mood.
That reminds me, I did finally go see the Kingsman. Speaking of tonal dissonance, and
Was I right about the church scene?
you were. Yes and no, because you were right that it was a total shift in tone, but the execution of that scene, see, it went from this campy nudge nudge wink wink James Bond sort of thing to some serious business gory violence, but it was done in such a cartoonish manner that it was, I don't want to say acceptable, but it was kind of acceptable. It was just so over the top cheesy. And that sort of made it okay for me. Made it okay to watch it.
Oh man, in terms of an artist just stopping a movie and pulling back the curtain and stepping out to like beat a hobby horse, to beat his favorite dog with whatever stick is to hand. That was one of the most egregious examples I've ever seen. Like I wrote an essay about it on my blog after I saw Kingsman. I just found it so jarring.
In fact, they even close out the scene with Samuel L. Jackson saying, "This isn't that kind of movie," right?
Yeah.
Yeah, which destroyed my suspension of disbelief, or whatever was left of it.
Yeah, they definitely had a thing going, and it wasn't serious movie, even though the violence was very, very serious.
Good point.
Okay.
Was a serious house on the serious earth?
A great graphic novel. That'd be the Arkham Asylum graphic novel, Serious House on Serious Earth.
I was referring to the poem that gave both their name, but yeah.
Oh, okay.
The phrase refers to a church, actually. But yeah.
Really?
Yep.
What poem is it from?
Oh man, you'd have to ask me. I can't remember, but I know it's about like a dude. Like the main character in the poem is actually an atheist, and he's like wandering through the ruins of this old New England church, and he realizes that for all the supposed superstition and everything, it's like, no, this is a serious house on serious earth. That's where that comes from.
I'm gonna have to go back and take a look at the poem and see what. Obviously, that was a deliberate allusion in the title of the graphic novel, but I'm gonna have to, when I have some time, go back and read the poem and then read the graphic novel to see if there are any other linkages, thematic or event-wise, between the two.
Always a great idea. I endorse your quest, sir.
Okay, and fact of the matter is, we got about 7 minutes left, which is fine. So, the last thing I have on the list to do, to talk about today for second-rate sci-fi is Call of Duty Advanced Warfare. I did a live tweet of my playthrough through it, and it is the worst example of every single thing that has come up about everything else we've been talking about the entire show. Where if you have a great story or a great game and you're involved in it, then you can keep on, you won't notice a lot of flaws, but as soon as major roadblocks are thrown in your way, all the flaws leap out and they just keep on building up and building up and building up. I don't know if that's because these works are bad and therefore they have more flaws to notice, or if it's because you notice them more because the story and the writing is so bad. I tend to actually think it's the first. The people who do bad writing and bad plotting also tend to have not been lazy about their research and not done the work. So just a couple of things that what immediately took me out of it is that as soon as you get into the story, they mention a PMC, a private military company who used to be known apparently as mercenaries, but now we have to change all that, just like we used to have guerrilla fighters, now we have to change them to insurgents. PMC, this was 15 minutes into the game, and I guessed that they were the bad guys. even though they are being presented as allies of the military. And
Because
then you find
they're
out,
contractors, right? And that means that they're bad.
yes, they're evil. Private military contractors, therefore they're evil. Then you find out that the PMC is run by Kevin Spacey. So
That confers automatic villain status.
Automatic villain status. And then, even further in, you find out that the PMC is the largest military in the world. Which, at that point, they're not even telegraphing their punches. They're just straight out telling you, hey, these are bad guys.
Well, come on, I think Kevin Spacey has his act together. What could go wrong?
Yeah, I actually asked in my tweet, PMC being run by Kevin Spacey, am I being punked? The only plot twist possible at this point is if he isn't the big bad guy. Nope. He is the big bad guy. Some other funky things about... They have bombs that blow up the quiet things. They have grenades that you can flip the top on to make them... They're multi-purpose grenades. You flip the top on to do different things, one of which paints all the enemies on your HUD for a short while. You can see where they are, even if they're behind cover and stuff. I don't know how a grenade does that, blows up to do that. Someone in the, responding said something about nanites flying out or whatever. I thought, well, that would have been cool if they had actually bothered to justify it. They didn't. They have a laser weapon with more recoil than anything else in the entire game. Directed energy weapons they technically have some recoil, but it's not recoil that you can actually detect with a scientific instrument calibrated to this world. So they're not recoil that's going to knock it off the target if a human being is shooting it. That's one of the benefits of shooting a directed energy weapon. I'm saying this for the audience. It was just, they're going to give a seat on the Security Council to this PMC. At one point, you're riding hover bikes that are actually shooting flames from the bottom of the bike. So I don't know how they avoid setting paper and leaves aflame as you fly through, or how they avoid setting your leg pants aflame as you fly through. But also, the metal is white hot, literally white hot, which means it's several thousand degrees, which means it would melt the asphalt and set it afire. You fly across some water at some point, the water should be boiling almost instantly into clouds behind you.
I think that's the most awesome thing I've ever heard you say.
So
it sounds like you really like this game.
It was. I have played every Call of Duty game all the way through except Black Ops 2, and this was the worst of all of them.
Do you play lots of multiplayer, or do you just try the single-player campaigns?
Only single player. I don't do multiplayer. For technical reasons at this point, I don't have a fast enough internet connection for multiplayer. But let's see. Concrete you can shoot through with an energy weapon stops an EMP. Don't know if that works or not. Yeah, it just... You can make it. This is actually one thing they did really cool. Is you have a grenade you can toss out that would home in on targets, and you could see how such a thing might technically be possible. But then they have SAMs, surface-to-air missiles, which can be dodged by VTOL planes, just rocking a little bit to the left and a little bit to the right. So you can make grenades that can vector in on targets rapidly, but you can't make missiles that will do the same thing. I'm not sure how that works. Yeah, just a bunch of little, or big, or huge problems that just took me out of enjoying it.
All I know is that on a late-night Twitch TV binge, I compared people playing the new COD when it first came out, it was pretty popular. At the same time, I compared it to a tournament play of Counter-Strike, Global Offensive, the latest version of Counter-Strike, and the COD just looked slow and clunky, and it was just like a bland shooter with guys using grappling hooks to flip around and everything. Whereas the Counter-Strike matches were all like interesting and you could tell there's a lot of skill involved, and the game ran smoothly on all the machines that I saw it on. I don't know, it looked like an inferior game, and to be a new game is just sort of, it blew my mind to see that.
Yeah. So, as far as the gameplay goes, no, it was not interesting. It was not enjoyable. They did not do a job. It's not a game even made by Infinity Ward, who made the original Call of Duty, nor is it made by the Eastern European studio who picked up the expansion packs in between the originals and then also did Call of Duty 3, Call of Duty Black Ops, who has gotten much, much better and actually produced quite really good games. Better than Infinity Ward when you compare it to Call of Duty Ghosts. It was made by another studio. It was amateurish, the level design, and all the things they did bad thoroughly. The realism was bad, and it was just mediocre sci-fi. So, yeah. We're actually down to the wire, so we've got to go. But I'll give you guys both a chance to say something before we take off.
Oh no.
Hey, thanks for listening in. That was a great chat, guys. I love talking about bad stuff. It's way more fun than talking about good stuff. See y'all next week.
See ya.
All right. This has been Geek Gab, the Geekerific Gab Fest. I'm your host, Daddy Warpig. Me and my co-hosts, Dornall and Bryan Niemeyer, are here every week, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. You can catch us on Twitter. Our addresses are in the description below. You can catch me online, daddywarpig.com, daddywarpig.com, and the homepage for Geek Gab, is.gd. That stands for isgood/Geek Gab. We are your hosts signing out for tonight. We will be back.